Today we look at former first-round pick Robert Hassell, and I'm here to tell you I still think that it is too early to give up on the former first-round pick.
You are Locked On Nationals, your daily Washington Nationals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thank you all for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. And of course, I'm your host, Ryan Clary. You can catch me over on Twitter at RyanClary11 and as well as our show page at LO_Nationals. For all your latest Nationals news and notes, make sure to check us out over on Twitter. A little bit later on in today's show, we've got a Nationals game day with Trevor Williams on the bump. Entering 2025, can he do what he did in 2024 into 2025? We'll have that discussion for you a little bit later on in the show today. But second segment, what happens with the land of the misfit toys? I've got a handful of Nationals players who do have talent, guys that I really want to see at some points this season. But what do the Nationals do with them as of right now? I've got a couple of names in there that you're going to want to hear about in that second segment. But we start off discussing today on Locked On Nationals, the former first-round pick in that Juan Soto deal, Robert Hassell III. And I am here to tell you today that it is still too soon to give up on Robert Hassell. Now, I have done this over the last two seasons. Going into 2024, I'm like, everybody, it is way too soon to give up on this guy, Robert Hassell. He's got the talent. He can play really good defense. He has the contact potential that could get up to like a 60 grade. And at one point, that's where he was. But really, since the Nationals traded for him in 2022, he has completely fallen off a cliff. In that year, in 2022, he was in high A with the San Diego Padres in Fort Wayne. In those 75 games, he had 10 home runs, 55 RBIs, nearly batting 300, and 846 OPS in that season. And again, a top 10 pick back in 2020, I believe? Like, this was a legit top prospect in all of baseball. Robert Hassell III still has that skill set that he did back when the Nationals traded for him in 2022. You might be thinking to yourself, maybe you don't really follow prospects. Well, what has happened to him? What has happened to the production? Well, in that year, in 2022, he suffered a hamate injury down in his bone. And if you don't know, these injuries are very tough to get rid of. Back just 2 years ago, a superstar, a future Hall of Famer, Mike Trout, suffered the same injury as Robert Hassell III. If you look at Mike Trout's numbers in 2024, now it was only like 30 games, his power numbers completely fell off a cliff. Like, I believe just in 2021, Mike Trout hit 40 home runs, and only in 120 games that season. That is good for his second most in a single season in his career. One of the better baseball players that you will ever see. It's affected him as well. Now, I'm not here to tell you that this is going to be a lingering injury for the rest of his career. But this past season, the same kind of thing happened to him. He, first off, to end spring training, he had like a groin injury, I believe, that shut him down for a couple weeks. And that was obviously really bad because, again, when you have this injury history, you don't want to see it pile up, especially in certain areas there. So he had that, and then he ended up hurting his hand again in 2024. So if you look at the numbers over these past two seasons with the Nationals, they're pretty discouraging. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. In 2024, across three different levels when he was promoted to AAA last year, which probably was a little premature. But in the 60 games that he had in AA, he had a 729 OPS, batting .270, and his strikeouts were down just a little bit. But if you kind of go into Robert Hassell and what makes him special, what made him a first round pick, he's kind of similar with Dylan Cruz. If you look at Robert Hassell and all the skills that he has, he's really good defensively, as we saw him make a diving catch the other day in spring training. He's good with contact, or at least was. He has done that at a not so high level over the past few seasons with the Nationals. He does surprisingly have a little power in there also. Last year, he only hit 5 home runs, though. But with a hamate injury in that hand, that really kind of zaps the power of a lot of different hitters. You have seen a ton of star players in year past, to name a few. Again, Mike Trout and also Giancarlo Stanton early on in his career. Now, that didn't really affect Stanton overall, because I believe he went in a few years later, had an MVP season, and was then traded to the New York Yankees. But that's not what Robert Hassell III is. This injury has affected him in a lot of different ways. Unfortunately, it has also lingered him over these past few years. But I look back to his Arizona Fall League from this past year, where again, for the second straight year, the Nationals sent him there, and for the second straight year, looked pretty good, except this time around, he was actually hitting for pretty damn good power. He had 4 home runs in just 22 games in the Fall League this past year. 19 RBIs, batted .280. His slugging was back up to a .517, nearly 200 points better than what he has been hitting with the Nationals these past 2 seasons. Now, I'm not here to tell you that Robert Hassell III is going to be a Dylan Cruz, nor even a James Wood, or might not even be a Jacob Young. But one thing is for sure that we don't necessarily talk about with Hassell is that his defense is going to be there, and it's going to be stout. He's got a great arm from really all 3 positions out in the outfield. He covers a lot of ground in center field and right field and also in left field. And he is just overall a very high baseball IQ kind of guy that Davey Martinez and Mike Rizzo simply will not give up on that. This is still a prime candidate going to 2025 to have that breakout season. And he could do it. One of the keys to that, though, is something that we have talked about a lot so far, is him to stay healthy. Going into 2024, looking at his numbers, really right before he hurt that hand yet again, his exit velos were actually up. But then again, he kind of had that injury back in 2024, and it hindered what he could do. But now, going into the season, he's putting up another pretty solid spring training. And yes, it's only 2 games. There's a lot of baseball to be played moving forward. But in these 2 games, it's hard not to notice the ceiling of Robert Hassell. The defense is going to be there no matter what. The question is, or the 2 questions that we have, is can he stay healthy? And number 2, can he continue to produce at the plate? Because I can tell you this much, Jacob Young is a great defensive center fielder, but his offense is replaceable. It's absolutely replaceable. And if Robert Hassell III, let's say he puts up really good numbers this season in AAA. Let's say that he's still kind of in the fold to be a starter moving forward for the Nationals. And also, let's throw in this pie here. Jacob Young struggles at the plate. You know he's going to be good defensively, but let's say he really struggles at the plate. I would not be surprised to see Robert Hassell III called up to be your national center fielder, and who knows what happens with Jacob Young at that point. But I've always been pretty hard on Jacob Young, I guess you could say, because I like him, but I think he's relatively replaceable. And I think his defense alone is valuable to this team. But if you can find someone who's almost as good defensively, but also a little bit better offensively, then I'm going with that second option any day of the week. And luckily for the Nationals, that second option might be in-house with Robert Hassell III if he can stay healthy. Now, a lot of the conversations around Robert Hassell is, again, if this guy can stay healthy, because it is a big if. These past few seasons have been brutal for injuries for him, whether it be a strain in his groin or, again, the hamate bone injury that he broke in the fall league back in 2022 that has still lingered on these past few years. But if now is the time that he is healthy, which he has told MLB.com and over this past few months that he is 100% healthy and good to go, and it certainly seems like he is as we get into spring training, then you might have to watch out for Robert Hassell III potentially being called up in the majors pretty early on this season and getting some serious playing time. It's a lot of ifs, but it's really not that far-fetched for someone who was a top prospect and for someone who was a really prime candidate to be the future of the outfield here in DC. So hopefully Robert Hassell III can stay healthy. But again, to end that off, it is a big if. Speaking of ifs, there's a lot of ifs. Like, what ifs on this Nationals roster? I have called these guys the land of the misfit toys. What happens with them? To name a few, Juan Yepez, Andres Chaparro, and Jose Tena. What happens to them? There's really not that much room on this roster. We'll discuss that after this. Now we get back into it here on Locked On Nationals. You can check us out over on YouTube. Again, search up Locked On Nationals and hit that subscriber button. Of course, wherever you get your podcasts as well. Again, search Locked On Nationals and hit that subscriber button. The land of the misfit toys. What happens with these guys? There's a lot of talent on as far as these guys go. But I want to start off with Jose Tena. As of right now, if I had to guess, it's going to be Paul DeJong as your opening day third baseman. The Nationals need power. Paul DeJong provides that. 24 home runs last year between the White Sox and the Royals, and pretty solid defensively, and has also been a clubhouse leader with the Cardinals and has had good all-star seasons in the past. Knowing Davey Martinez and how Mike Rizzo continues to want to build on this rebuild, they're going to probably play the veteran guy, and that is a frustrating thing. So that leaves Jose Tena in a backup role, or in a situational role, you could say. I think as of right now, like if it were up to me, Jose Tena would be my opening day third baseman. That is something that I'm already pre-mad about with the Nationals, because he did actually show a lot this past year. And he bats from the left side of the plate. Paul DeJong is a righty. Like, they're going to play some situational baseball this season. And I think with the Nationals, as far as like what they should do and what they shouldn't do, Jose Tena is going to go against every right-handed pitcher. Paul DeJong is going to go against every left-handed pitcher. And that's how it's going to be. But if it were up to me, Jose Tena would be the guy. He's 23 years old. He'll be 24 right before opening day. He's still young, and he's got a lot of potential. Looking at his numbers down with the Cleveland Guardians and even in AAA Rochester this past season, the guy can flat out hit. And he can hit for power too. Looking at it, in AAA last year, in 90 games, he batted nearly 300, had a 493 slug, had 14 stolen bases and 17 home runs. This guy is talented. Now the downside though is his defense. That is where he's going to get in trouble. And especially the fact is that the Nationals are really honing in on defense. If you take Jose Tena, and let's say he had the defensive capability of Paul DeJong, then it would be no question in my mind that Jose Tena would be your opening day third baseman. But I think that right now, he's just going to get caught in that backup role. He could be trade bait at this deadline for someone who might look at his exit velos down in the minors and even up in the majors also, where his first game, he had a walk-off for the Nationals. That's a hard moment to forget for a lot of Nats fans. But as of right now, I just think that he is going to be caught in the middle between Brady House and also Paul DeJong. Because the Nationals, they're going to want to try to trade Paul DeJong, especially if he's going to be hitting for power and playing solid over at third base. And then you'll see Brady House come up at one point in time. But I think Jose Tena right now, the where he fits, is probably in that backup role up in the majors. And you'll see him get relatively consistent at bats, maybe later on in games, in different situations. But that's where I see Jose Tena. He will be on the big league roster, but you probably won't see him all too much. Juan Yepez now. This is one of those interesting things where I think Juan Yepez probably ends up down in AAA. And it's probably not fair either. Because again, Yepez, I think, last year had a ton of potential and had a pretty good season at the plate, I might add. But where he sits today, you're going to be behind Nathaniel Lowe, who's your starting first baseman. Then Josh Bell, who's going to be your DH/backup first baseman when days that Nathaniel Lowe is going to want to take off. But I think where Juan Yepez is this is kind of one of those good guys to have down in AAA. He's not necessarily like your 4A player. Like, I do think Yepez and what he does at the plate, he belongs in the majors. But it's just a matter of where he fits. And with where the Nationals are currently, I think that he loses out a job to an Andres Chaparro, where we're going to get into in a few minutes here. But to finish up with Juan Yepez, like, this guy is good. Like, he's really good offensively. Provides power. Has also done it in the postseason, as we all remember what he did against the Phillies just back a few years ago when he was with the Cardinals. But I think he loses a job to Andres Chaparro, who we can get into right now. Andres Chaparro was the guy that the Nationals got for Dylan Floro at last year's deadline. And Dylan Floro had a really good season for the Nationals. Kind of fell off there before the deadline. That hurt his stock just a little bit. But I remember when the Nationals traded for Andres Chaparro, I was like, who the heck is this guy? He's not even in their top 30 prospects. And the Diamondbacks, they have a very top-heavy prospect pool. But other than that, they're not really loaded. And we got this guy, Andres Chaparro. I was like, well, what the hell is this guy? What is he going to do? Well, then you look at his numbers, and you're like, oh, this guy can really hit for power. And he did that across a lot in minor leagues for the Diamondbacks. And then he came up to the Nationals and had a pretty solid season for them. In 33 games, Chaparro had a 694 OPS. He did fall off a little bit, but even then, he hit 4 home runs and 15 RBIs in just 121 at-bats in 2024. But then you look at his AAA numbers. Across 2 different teams, he batted .330 with a 977 OPS. And also had 23 home runs and 85 RBIs in 105 games. Well, let's look at the year prior. AAA with the Yankees. He had a 775 OPS and still provided some power because he hit 25 home runs. Well, looking at 2022 with the New York Yankees. Had a 962 OPS and batted nearly 300 yet again. Like, I don't know where people have been on Andres Chaparro, but he is that guy that I want to see. And he is 25 years old. He's going to be 26 at some point this summer. He is one of those guys where I think he should be on this major league team. Someone that will bring damage. Someone who does hit for power. You can find a role for Chaparro on this team at whatever position. Like, he's not going to really play great defensively, but you can't tell me that this guy is just some nubber out there. Like, he is a good power hitter. Like, he has proven that over these past few seasons. So I think that he's going to be, again, one of those guys that should be on the major league roster. And I think he will be on the major league roster. But where does he fit and where do his at-bats come? Probably on off days, probably in pinch hitting situations, and maybe a day game at like 1:05 p.m. in Nats Park. You'll see him thrown in the middle of the lineup. But I think in those opportunities, he'll probably provide some damage for you. And the Nationals, they always need that. So that's kind of where I am at with some of these misfit toys. I have one more, though, and it's a fan favorite. It's Alex Call. Alex Call, again, he is the definition of a 4A player. And for those who do not know what a 4A player is, it's someone who is too good for AAA, but just not quite good enough for the majors. So they fit in between as a 4A player. Now, there is nowhere for Alex Call to go. Like, there is no such thing as a 4A. There's AAA and then there's the majors. I think Alex Call, unfortunately for him, will likely start out down in the minors. Maybe he wins a job to be in the outfield as that fourth guy there. But he's not a bad backup option. And if it were up to me, like, I would have Alex Call be like the clubhouse leader. Everything about him, the hustle, the hard 90s when he runs to first base, the contact that he displays at times, like Alex Call is like your perfect utility man, but may just not be that consistent. And the talent may not be always there. But he is still someone that you just love to root for. And I saw someone post this the other day. I wish I can give credit to who it was, but a grid of Nationals players. Everyone loves Alex Call, but we all know that he's like kind of like an average player, to be nice. And that's the nice way to put it, by the way. But I think Alex Call, you're going to see him at some point for the Nats at this year. He's always going to be up. The Nationals love this guy, and also you should love him. Good player, good guy, easy to root for, plays his butt off, and is a good leader. And Davey Martinez loves the guy, and they should, because this guy is a good baseball player. It's just, unfortunately, not for the Nationals at this point in time. Thank you all for making Locked On Nats your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Let's preview today's game. You got the Marlins going up against the Nationals with Trevor Williams on the bump, and it's actually a pretty damn good pitching matchup as well, because you've got Edward Cabrera for the Miami Marlins, and then you've got, again, Trevor Williams. So let's talk about that after we tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. And when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because with FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or what to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. Like yesterday, believe it or not, I actually had the Wizards money line, and of course they won, but I also took the points and took the over for the Wizards Nets game. And of course it worked out for your Washington Wizards, and you actually got a win. I believe that's number 10 on the season. And yes, that is a pathetic win number, but we are here. So right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Now we get into it with the Washington Nationals going up against those Miami Marlins. And we've got a little bit of a dilemma to talk about here. Trevor Williams, not a dilemma, but that's dramatic. Trevor Williams had a great 2024, a tremendous 2024. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop all summer long. He then got hurt, was shut down for a few months, came back, and again, looked really good. Kudos to him. But can he replicate that going into 2025 now? Well, the Nationals gave him a 2-year deal. He's going to be in the starting rotation. He's going to be a pretty key piece to the Nationals and the leadership value for this organization. Like, they're putting a lot of pennies in the piggy bank for Trevor Williams. But how confident are you that he can have yet another really good season for this team? My confidence on a scale of 1 to 10 is probably at like a 3. I like Trevor Williams, but I'm not expecting a sub-3 ERA. Hell, I'm probably not even expecting a sub-3.5 ERA. If I had to predict his line right now today, he probably makes around 28 to 30 starts, and he'll have an ERA right around a 3.8. And that's okay. That is what Trevor Williams is. And maybe he did just completely reinvent himself. maybe he is going to have a big season for the Nationals in 2025. But I'm not sold on it. And I don't think a lot of people out there should be, by the way, because he is good and he's going to be good for this team. But as of right now, I'm not buying in on what he did in 2024. Like, he's going to be solid for this team, but I have said this time and time again. He is that fireman for this organization. He should be the guy coming out of the bullpen and spraying it down with water, eating up innings, and kind of being in that Patrick Corbin role and making those spot starts. Just eat up innings. That's what I want from Trevor Williams. And I think that's what the Nationals should ask for from Trevor Williams. He's good, but he's also replaceable. So with that in mind, I'm not all the way in on Trevor Williams having another huge season for the Nationals. I'm just not. And if I'm wrong, then I hope I am. Like, honestly, good guy, easy to root for, clubhouse leader, and that's that for Trevor Williams. So thank you all for making Locked On Nats your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You guys enjoy the spring training game today. But until then, I will catch you on the flip side. Have a good one. Go Nats.